Hello and welcome to this episode in our series on management information systems. This is the fourth chapter and it is titled Ethical and Social Issues in Information Systems. This is the outline. We are going to talk about what ethical, social and political issues are raised by information systems. We also talk about what specific principles for conduct can be used to guide ethical decisions. Also, why do contemporary information systems, technology, and the internet pose challenges to the protection of individual privacy and intellectual property? And lastly, how have information systems affected laws for establishing accountability, liability, and the quality of everyday life? So to begin, the ethical issues, right? So what's ethics? Now, ethics refers to principles of right and wrong that individuals acting as free moral agents use to make choices to guide their behaviors, right? So the ethics is the principles of right and wrong, right? And individuals use these principles of right and wrong to guide their behaviors. Now, information systems raise new ethical questions because they create opportunities for intense social change. They also threaten existing distributions of power, also money rights and obligations, and it brings about new kinds of crime. Society was relatively a compound, right? Then IT as a rock dropped in that pond, and this created ripples of new situations not covered by old rules. Now, social and political institutions cannot respond overnight to these changes, right, or to these ripples. It may take years to develop etiquette, expectations, and laws. It requires understanding of ethics to make choices in legally gray areas, right? Now, a legal gray area is practically, a dilemma of sorts where you have two options, and both options are equally, worse, or they are equally negative, or you can't clearly see the right from the wrong, right? That's what legal gray areas is talking about. So what is the relationship between the ethical, social, political issues in an information society, right? Information society is simply referring to a society that makes use or that is endowed with information technology and information systems, right? The introduction of new information technology has a ripple effect, raising new ethical, social, and political issues that must be dealt with on individual, social, and political levels. These issues have 5 moral dimensions, right? Now, there is the information rights and obligations, right? That's over here, right? Rights, property rights, and obligations. And there's information rights and obligations. No, that's over here. Information rights and obligations is over here, rather. And then you have property rights and obligations. You have system quality, and you have the quality of life, right? That's individual, society, and polity, right? Polity is just referring to a political society. Now, so these are the 5 dimensions of morality that information system has, brought about. Not just information systems, but information technology as well. Now, right, so this is just, a reiteration of what I just said. Now, key technology trends that raise ethical issues. For example, so some of the key technology or some of the key technological trends that are raising ethical issues involve what? The doubling of computer power. More organizations depend on computer systems for critical operations, right? So another trend is the rapidly declining data storage costs. Now, organizations can easily maintain detailed databases on individuals, right? So it doesn't really cost much to store data. So you have organizations and they have so much information about their customers, right? And sometimes that invades their privacy, and it's an ethical issue. Now, another trend is networking advances in the internet. Right, this involves copying data from one location to another and accessing personal data from remote locations easier. Right, so now it's easy to get data from anywhere about anyone. Now, another trend is the advances in data analysis techniques. Right, so there is profiling, combining data from multiple sources to create dossiers of detailed information on individuals. Right, so it's easy to get information about someone and just profile them and really study them and analyze their moves and their the information to really get to know them, right? And that's very scary. Now, the last trend is the mobile device growth. Right, now mobile phones have become increasingly powerful. Right, you can use one mobile phone to track another mobile phone, and that raises a lot of ethical concerns. What will one do with such power? Now, another key trend is NORA. Now, that's non-obvious relationship awareness. Right, now what NORA does is that it combines data from multiple sources to find obscure hidden connections that might help identify criminals or terrorists. Right, now NORA technology can take information about people from disparate sources and find obscure, non-obvious connections. It might discover, for example, that an applicant for a job at a casino shares a telephone number with a known criminal and issue an alert to the hiring manager. Right, so you realize that the NORA technology can take information about people from disparate sources. Right, disparate sources just means different sources or separate sources. Right, so these are the sources. You have watch lists, you have incident and arrest systems, customer transaction systems, telephone records, and human resource systems. Right, and this is the name standardization match merge. So the information is extracted from all these bases. Right, and when it comes over here, it's analyzed and the obscure connection is established, and if it's a dangerous one, alerts are issued out. Right, obviously that's a very dangerous thing, right? Because connections from your past can just come up, and even though you are trying to be a better person, then your opportunities will be blocked. So this is too powerful in some instances, but it can also be very useful. Right, now these are the basic concepts for ethical analysis. Right, I'm talking about the principles that will help guide ethical decisions. Right, this was the second item on our outline. So the principles to guide ethical decisions. The basic concepts of ethical analysis are responsibility, accountability, liability, and due process. For responsibility, it involves accepting the potential costs, duties, and obligations for decisions. Right, so meaning that you have to understand that you are liable and you are responsible for whatever you use your information technology and your information systems for. Accountability involves the mechanisms for identifying responsible parties, making sure that the people who are responsible account for their actions. Right, then liability, that's just saying who should be blamed. Right, now it permits individuals and firms to recover damages done to them. Right, because if someone is liable for their actions, when they default, you can seek redress from them in a court or any appropriate authority. Now the fourth is what due process. That is that laws are well known and understood, with an ability to appeal to higher authorities. Right, so you have to take your time and let the law work. So these are general principles that guide ethical decisions. Now, this is the 5-step ethical analysis. Right, so these are 5 steps that we use to analyze situations. Now you identify and clearly describe the facts of the situation. Right, 2 is you define the conflict or dilemma and identify the high order values involved. 3, you identify the stakeholders, the people who are going to be affected by the decisions that you are going to take, or the actions that you are going to make and take. Sorry. Now, 4, you identify the options that you can reasonably take, right? The reasonable options that you can take. And 5, you identify the potential consequences of your options, right? By doing that, you can have, which choices will cost you the most, or which choices will cost you the least. Very well. Now, this is talking about the candidate ethical principles. Now, these are some of the principles that govern organizations, and when organizations are also recruiting people, these are some of the ethical principles that they look out for, right? So the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? So that comes from the biblical text, like the Bible. Now we have Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which says that if an action is not right for everyone to take, it is not right for anyone. That's Kantian theory, right? That's a categorical imperative. Right. Now we have Descartes' rule of change, which says that if an action cannot be taken repeatedly, it is not right to take at all. Now we have the utilitarian principle, which says to take action that achieves the higher or greater value, right? So the utilitarian principle is for the actions that will benefit the greater good. So it's simply saying that it's okay for a few people to get hurt if the majority of people who benefit, right? This is usually the principle that goes into governance, right? In governance, that's one of the principles that are utilized. Now there's a risk aversion principle that has to do with taking the action that produces the least harm or potential cost. And also there's the ethical no free lunch rule, right? Assume that virtually all tangible and intangible objects are owned by someone unless there is a specific declaration otherwise, right? So there's something like a free lunch. Whatever you consume, you pay for it. So it's best to know what you're paying for before you consume something, right? So that's that. Right, now the principles that guide ethical decisions, we have the professional codes of conduct, right? Now professional ethics encompass the personal and corporate standards of behavior expected of professionals, right? So you have professional codes of ethics, right? And they are also used to seek to set out the expectations that the profession in a society have of its members, right? So as a professional working in a professional institution, society has expectations of you, so you have to meet those expectations, right? And the professional codes of conduct set out those expectations and how professionals should go about their decisions, right? So for instance, some of these professional codes of conduct have been promulgated by associations of professionals, right? Examples is the AMA, which stands for the Association of Computing Machinery. That's ACM. AMA is the American Medical Association. You have the ABA, which is the American Bar Association, and the AITP, which is what? Association of Information Technology Professionals, right? So this is saying that what some of these professional codes of conduct have been put forth by these organizations or these professions. So these professional institutions or associations. Now, promises by professions to regulate themselves in the general interest of society, right? So that's also one of the codes of conduct, right? Certain professions promise to do their best or act in a way that will benefit society. So now we are talking about the challenges to privacy and intellectual property, right? But before we discuss the challenges, let's talk about what privacy and intellectual property is. Now, privacy and freedom in the internet age refers to the need and desire of individuals to be left alone, free from surveillance or interference from other individuals, organizations, or states. They claim to be able to control information about yourself, right? So that's what privacy is talking about. Privacy is talking about how we as individuals need and want to be left alone, right? We don't want anyone to be monitoring our movements on the internet, and we want to be able to control the information that pertains to our personality or ourselves. Now, in the United States, privacy is protected by the First Amendment, right? That's the freedom of speech. And the Fourth Amendment, right? That's the unreasonable search and seizure, Act. And the third is the additional federal statutes. That's, for example, the Privacy Act of 1974, right? So that's for privacy. Now, intellectual property. Intellectual property is the intangible property of any kind created by individuals or corporations. Three main ways that intellectual property is protected is through trade secrets, copyright, and patents, right? So intellectual property is the intangible property, right? So like music or trade secret, so it's basically anything that someone creates that cannot be seen physically, right? So music, movies, and other things. Very well. Now, when you talk about how intellectual property is protected, we have the trade secret, right? That's intellectual work or product belonging to a business, not in a public domain. So it's usually a secret along the value chain that gives an organization a competitive advantage, right? And then they keep that as a secret. So that's what we mean by a trade secret, right? It's a secret to their success, so they own it. Now, the copyright is a statutory grant which protects intellectual property from being copied for the life of the author plus 70 years, meaning that if you own intellectual property, copyright laws give you exclusive rights to that property, rights, meaning that no one can copy your work without permission for the duration of your life and 70 years after you are gone. And patents grant the creator of an invention an exclusive monopoly on ideas behind the invention for 20 years, right? Very well. Right, so the challenges to privacy and intellectual property, right? So let's talk about the challenges to privacy posed by the internet. First, we have cookies. Now, cookies are small pieces of text sent to your browser by a website you visit. Now, these cookies help the website remember the information about your visit, which can both make it easier to visit the site again and make the site more useful to you. 2. Web beacons or web bars. Now, these are tiny graphics embedded in emails and web pages. They monitor who is reading email message or visiting a site. 3. Spyware. Now, spyware is a malicious software that enters a user's computer, gathers data from the device and user, and sends it to third parties without the consent of the user. 4. Google services and behavioral targeting. Now, Google services utilize behavioral targeting to deliver personalized content and ads to users based on their online behavior, such as search history, browsing activity, and interactions with Google products. Right. So these are the challenges posed to privacy by the internet, right? And some of the technical solutions include email encryption, anonymity tools, like incognito browsing and other things, right? And then you have anti-spyware tools, and you have browser features, right? You can use private browsing, and you can also turn on your do not track options, right? These are ways and mechanisms that, technically speaking, you can use to counter or overcome the challenges to privacy which the internet will pose to you as a user. So let's talk about the challenges to intellectual property rights, right? Now, digital media is different from physical media, right? And the difference lies in the fact that digital media is easily replicated, right? And then there is ease of transmission, networks or internet, right? And there's difficulty in classifying software. There's also that the compactness and difficulties in establishing uniqueness, right? Now, remember that we said that intellectual property is intangible property, right? Now, intangible property exists on the internet, or that's how you make that's a domain of intellectual property, right? Well, intellectual property. And then the challenges to that is that data property is easily replicated, right? And it's easily transferred from one network to another, and that makes stealing it very easy, and replicating it and pirating make that very easy, right? And it's also difficult to classify such software very well. Now, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA, makes it illegal to circumvent technology-based protections of copyrighted materials, right? So with this one, the main protection is, it's a law, and that law says it is illegal to circumvent technology-based protections of copyrighted material. So whenever you trespass or break copyright laws, it's illegal, so to speak. Now, let's look at the Fair Information Practices, the FIP, right? Now, this is a set of principles governing the collection and use of information. The basis of most, the FIP is the basis of most US and European privacy laws. It's also based on mutuality of interest between the record holder and individual. The FIP has been restated and extended by the FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, in 1998 to provide guidelines for protecting online privacy, right? So these are more, so the FIP, the Fair Information Practices, is touching more on privacy, right? Now, it was used to drive changes in privacy legislation, so that speaks to the COPPA, that's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. They have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, right? They have the HIPAA or HIPAA, and that's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. Then there is also the Do Not Track Online Act of 2012, right? So these are some legislations. The FIP drove changes in this privacy legislation, right? And it brought about these legislations that I have just mentioned, right? So the Federal Trade Commission's FIP, that's the Fair Information Practices principles, include the following. The first is notice or awareness, which is a core principle. Now, websites must disclose practices before collecting data, right? And two is choice or consent, core principle. Right, choice or consent is also a core principle, so that consumers must be able to choose how information is used for secondary purposes, right? So you see that in some websites, they have you fill a questionnaire on whether or not you be comfortable with them sharing your information with third parties and so on, right? So that's because of the Federal Trade Commission's Fair Information Practices principles. The third is access or participation, and that's what it says consumers must be able to review and contest accuracy of personal data, right? Fourth is the security, and security says that data collectors must take steps to ensure accuracy and security of personal data, right? The data they collect must be accurate, and it must also be secured, right? Now, the fifth is enforcement, and it must be a mechanism. There must be a mechanism to enforce the FIP principles, right? Yeah. So the impact of information systems on law and quality, right? So when we talk about quality, we're talking about system quality, right? The information systems, right? How has information system, impacted quality in terms of system, right? And you can break quality down in terms of data quality and then system errors, right? And the flawless software is economically unfeasible, right? It's very difficult to generate or come out with on a software that is on flawless, right? Perfection costs a lot and is quite expensive. Now, the three principal sources of poor system performance are software bugs or errors, right? When there's an error in the code or the system. Now, the second is hardware or facility failures, right? That's when the hardware components are faulty or not reliable. Then the third is poor input data quality, and that's the most common source of business system failure. You know, if the system itself is working perfectly and you put in the wrong input, then it's going to end up in failure. Now, in terms of law, with information systems, there is a commission of illegal acts through the use of computer or against a computer system. Now, the computer may be object or instrument of a crime, right? And there's also computer abuse, where you have the unethical acts which are not illegal, but they are unethical, and that's made possible because of information systems, right? They are so powerful. Now, there's also spam and high cost for businesses in dealing with spam, right? Now, what are the negative social consequences of information systems? One, you have the balancing power, right? Although computing power is decentralizing, key decision making remains uncentralized. 2, rapidity of change. Businesses may not have enough time to respond to global competition, right? Because the change happens so fast. Information systems are always evolving, and it's almost impossible to keep up with the pace, especially if you're a small business. The third is maintaining boundaries, right? That's a consequence. Now, computing and computing and internet use lengthens workday, right? And it infringes on family and personal time. Yeah, so it's difficult to maintain boundaries, right? Because when you're using the computer, you can work for so long. Time can pass you by, and it makes it difficult to keep track of your personal time, and that time for your family, friends, relationships and stuff, right? It makes it very difficult, right? Because you can literally use the computer anywhere, which means that you can work anywhere, right? So it's very difficult to control it, and that's a consequence, right? The fourth is dependence and vulnerability. Public and private organizations are ever more dependent on computer systems, right? And it's a consequence, because if anything goes wrong with the systems of certain organizations, then they're in trouble big time, right? So it's just one of the negative social consequences of information systems. It has made organizations, both public and private ones, too dependable and quite vulnerable. Right now, in terms of employment, re-engineering work resulting in lost jobs, right? Information systems have re-engineered certain work and have made it, not necessary for human beings to do such work. So those human beings end up getting fired, right? So that's also an impact, a negative impact, if any, that information systems as both on the quality of life. Now there's equity and access, right? The digital divide. We have a video on this on the platform, so you can check it out. The digital divide. Well, now certain ethnic and income groups in the United States are less likely to have computer or internet access, right? And not just in the United States, but in the world, right? There are certain places and certain areas or even people that are unable to access computers or even have internet access, right? Now there's health risk as well, right? Now A is a repetitive stress injury, that's RSI. The largest source is it comes from computer keyboards, right? So computer keyboards are a major cause of RSI, that's repetitive stress injury, and we also have the carpal tunnel syndrome, right? That happens when you use keyboards a lot, like when you are typing for long hours and stuff, right? That's where the repetitive comes from, right? You put stress on your fingers. Other health risks are the computer vision syndrome, that's the CVS, where you have eye strain and headaches related to screen use. Not everyone who wears glasses was born with bad eyesight. Some people spend a lot of time behind computer screens, and that was the end result, because of the rays. Now, C is the techno stress, that's aggravation, impatience, and fatigue. These are all things. These are some of the health risks that come with information systems. That is all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next chapter.